One of the first things you're going to need to set up if you want to use Business for project management and service management is your task types. So today we're going to spend a bit of time going through the task types, how you can configure them, and how you can set them up to be exactly as your company needs them. Now, types within Business will allow you to determine what's required versus what's not required, any additional fields you would like to be displayed, or any additional fields you'd like to be hidden. You can all determine that by the type within Business. And today we're going to be talking about the task types. Before we dive into the task types though, I do want to show you just how tasks work within the system as is. The great thing about task is there's no setup that needs to be done to just start cranking in task into your system. So if you do want to add task right away without any configuration, you would just click on this task icon up here, the tab right here, and then you would go to task. Now this is going to take you to your task list. Now by default, it's only showing you your tasks that are assigned to you. Now you can always change this by hitting the search icon right up here. This will pull up some search filters that you can then change to get to the task that you're looking for. So you can see by default, the task status is open, so it's not showing me any tasks that have already been completed, and task assigned to, and that's my name right there. Now I can change this, so if I do want to see another associate's task, what they're currently working on, I can search for them, and then I can hit search. You can see she doesn't have any that are open currently. You can also search by customer as well, so if you want to see all the tasks related to a customer. And then you see it's not looking at a specific person assigned. Instead, it's just going by this filter because we took the task assigned to out and left it blank. So it's a good idea to utilize search filters throughout the system because it really gets you organized so you can find things quicker. Now there is another option, which is a saved search. Now saved searches can be really useful as well because it's a pre-filtered search, so you could just go to your drop-down list, hit the save search, and it's going to load everything for you automatically. Now to create a saved search, you would put in the type of search you want. So you're going to configure these filters as you need them. So let's say I want to see only the customer requests for information, and I only want to see the ones that are assigned to Brian, and then I'm going to get rid of this customer. I'm going to hit search. I'm not sure if there's any in here now. There's not, but that's fine. So what I can do now is once I have my search saved and I hit search and I have exactly how I want it, I can hit this down arrow right here, do save this search, and then I can name it. So I can call it Brian's Open Work, for example. Now, auto load search results is checked off by default. What that means is when I go to this page and I select that save search, it's going to automatically load it for me. I'm not going to have to hit the search button. If you have this unchecked, it's going to pre-filter the search filters, but you will have to hit search. Now, default means that when you go to this page, the task page, this would then be the default showing your task then. Now, I don't necessarily recommend doing a default on your task list. It is useful in other areas, but for tasks, the default can be a bit tricky because normally when you're going to the task list, you want to see the tasks that are assigned to you. So, but that really is personal preference if you do want to do a saved search for that. And then you just hit save. And then you see now when I go to this drop-down menu, you see I have Brian's task and I have Brian's open work. And you can see it's bolded, the one that I'm currently looking at. But I can then switch to Brian's task. Now, another good thing about saved searches is the saved search is actually put into the URL. So I can actually copy this and I can send it to someone in an email, a message, or instant message. And I can send them this exact search, and it's going to preload everything for them. So that's really useful. So if you have a saved search that you find useful, you can then send it to your teammates. So then they can have that search in here, and then they can bookmark it either in their browser, in Business, or they can just do a saved search themselves. So there's different ways you can kind of have your saved searches throughout the system. So now that you know how to quickly find your task, let's go ahead and talk about how to enter task. Now remember, this is still entering task with no configurations done. If you want, you can go into business and just start creating tasks without having to do any setup beforehand. Now it's very easy. Right here where it says enter title for new task, you just click into that field, type the work that needs to be completed, give it a title. So let's say, for example, file paperwork for extension. And then all I need to do at this point is just hit enter and a task is created. Now once a task is created, I can then go and configure more, so I can attach a customer so I know who the task is related to. I could set a due date so I know when this task should be due. The type is what we're going to be talking about in a moment. These are where your configurations kind of come in. But just to give you an idea, if I do choose billing inquiry, you can see there's a lot more fields that show up. So it's at the type level you can determine what do you want visible. And then you can even do some auto reassigning based on defaults by the type. So for example, when I switched it to the customer request for information, it had some auto calculations at the task type. I'm going to hit cancel for now though and just go back to none. So a task as it is now, you can add in a description. Now if you hit the description hyperlink or the edit icon, that's going to bring up an advanced editor box so you can enter in a more formatted, detailed description of your task. Okay? And then of course we do have a notes log, and then these icons up here, which are all very useful, but we're going to get more into discussing how to process your task and use your task in our next lesson. So now that I've shown you how easy it is to quickly add in a task, I do want to show you how you can set up your task types to make the most sense for your company so you're getting the most profitability out of it. So to set up your task types, you're going to want to go to Company and then Settings. And once you're in Settings, you're going to go to Task, and then you're going to go to Task Setup and Task Types. So you can see we do have some default ones in here already, and they can be used, or you can create a new one, or you can just configure the ones that are already created. It's really up to you. I'm going to go ahead and add one, and let's just call ours support ticket, for example. Display in menu means that it'll appear within the task list right here. So you see we have billing inquiry and support ticket displayed in the menu. It's just a way for you to pre-filter the type. So if I go to task and billing inquiry, it's going to show me all the tasks that are currently open with this type, instead of just the generic standard list, which just shows me what's assigned to me. This is kind of filtering by the type. Now if you do add it to the menu, it will be there for everyone, so that is something to keep in mind. If it's a type of task that pretty much everyone in the company would be using, then it makes sense to add it to there. But if it's a task type that only a few select people would be using, it may not make the most sense to put it there and instead have a saved search within your task list. Take a note also that when you do choose to display in the menu for your task type, it does take about 30 minutes to take effect, just because there's some things being done in the background to get it to show up on this list for you. So just keep in mind, if it's not showing up right away, it could take a bit of time. Visible on the partner portal allows for your customers to be able to log into the portal, and then they can get any updates they need. They can communicate with you via messaging, and they can pretty much just have clarity on what's being done with their task. Now there is a difference between having it visible and allowing your contact to create a task. Now you can have it visible so they can go in and get updates for the task, but you may not want them to be able to create tasks of that type. But it can be useful, especially for task types such as the customer requesting information or anything such as that. It can be useful to allow them to create a task in the portal. And this is something we'll be going over in our next lesson as well, is showing the different ways the customer can utilize the portal when it comes to projects and tasks. Another option you have is to have an email sent to the assigned to whenever the notes log is updated. So just to show you what that's like, within a task you have the assigned to, and you can have multiple assigned people on a task, and then you can go ahead and even reassign them if needed. Now what this option is saying, send email to assigned to when the notes log is updated. Whenever someone enters a note down here, then whoever is assigned to the task will get an email notifying them that there's been a note added, and it'll display the note as well. So this is a really great tool that can be used for managers, for example. If you have a group of your employees working on something and you want to give them an update and you want to update them all at once and they're all assigned to the task, you can simply go in there, enter a quick note, and then they will be notified. And then not only that, they're going to see that who entered the note, the time, and the date as well, which is very useful information. So this is what this option does then. So it can be very useful. Show recent orders and tasks will just allow you to open up a pop-up on the task, which will show you the recent orders and tasks that have been worked on for the customer. It's just a way to quickly get clarity on what's being done for the customer when you're working on something for them. Lead time is going into recurring tasks. So we do have an option, you can create a recurring task. Now the lead time is determining how far in advance does that task need to be created. So you can see there is a bit of an example. So if lead time is 30 days, then the recurring task will be created 30 days in advance. So it just wants to know how soon do you want this recurring task to be entered into your system. The default email is the email that's going to be displayed to the customer or to whoever is receiving notifications about the task. It is required. Now you can just put a generic company email like miles@information.com or something like that. You can put that, or you can put a specific person, perhaps like a division manager or something like that. And then you can see there is a brief description as well. Email to task is a really interesting feature, and it can be very useful. What an email to task does is you enter in an email here, and it has to be a unique email that goes across every company using business. Now, when you set your email, and a customer then sends an email to this email you have chosen, it'll actually create a task from the email. So it's very useful. Now you do have, as I mentioned before, you can have your customer sign into the portal and submit a task in the portal. Now if they're not quite ready to go in the portal, or they're not very computer savvy, you could just give them this email address, and this will then also create a task within your system. And you can see it does need to be a unique address. So you see I got that check mark here, which means that it's not in use yet. Now if I put one that is already used, that I know is used, you'll get this red X right here, and it's going to let you know that it's already in use by another company, and it must be unique. Whoops. And let me just refresh my page. Okay. The default assignment, so you can see there's quite a few things in here that you can set as default as well. Now the default assignment is just who this task should be assigned to, like it says, by default. Now the interesting thing about this is you can choose an employee. You can also choose a pool of people, which allows you to notify multiple people at once, which is really useful. It's a great way to make sure that everything is getting done because multiple people are being notified and people can stay on top of it. So you can see I can go ahead and choose the default assignment. Default priority just allows you to say by default when it's first created, is it a normal priority, a high priority, or is it an emergency? So you can have a task type that does contain more sensitive time matter than the other ones. So you may want to set a task type as an emergency if it does have a quicker resolution time that it must have. Now something to keep in mind is you can set up your default priorities. So let me just duplicate that tab. Now in the settings, if you go to task setup, and task priorities, you can create your own priorities right here. And you can see you can designate a color as well. Now it's asking for the response time. So the response time is how long it took you to actually start working on the task. So whoever the task is assigned to, the moment they viewed it, it was marked as in progress. So it's calculating how soon you should be responding to these tasks. And then this can go in handy when it comes to things like the service metrics report or the team efficiency, so that those calculations are being done. And we'll talk about that more in our next lesson, some reporting you can do for your task. So you see, you do have a default within the settings here for your priorities, but you can also set it at the task type as well. So you do have that versatility then. Now over on this side over here, it's asking you, what do you want, which options do you want to be displayed on your task? And you can see there's quite a lot you can include. So you want to make sure and check off the ones that are going to make the most sense for your company, information that's going to matter to you. So for example, customer location. And you can even make it required. So if this is something that's going to be done on site at a customer location, usually this task type, then you would maybe want to include the location so that way they can quickly get to where they need to be. They can quickly look up the address. Include requested by, and you can even make that required. Having the requested by, it can be very useful because you can select the customer's contact on there as well, as long as you have the customer selected. So this is allowing you to know, who do I need to contact if I have questions about this task? Who do I need to contact if I have questions in general? So this can be set as an external contact, so I know who to reach out to in my customer's company. Or I can have it set as an internal employee, which can be useful as well because I know who to go talk to about this internally. So this is a very useful field to have on. Making it required or not is really a personal preference. If it's something that you usually do have a lot of follow-up with and you do have a lot of communication with the customer or someone like that, it might be a good idea to make the requested by required so you make sure there is always someone you can reach out to for this task when you're working on it. Include task contacts is just allowing you to search and select the contacts more easily to the task. Include order is interesting, and you can see there's a lot of options that come up when you select the order. Now, with having the order on your task, that can also go in handy when it comes to things like the the service metrics report, because it's going to do some calculations dollar per task, and that's being done based on the order. You'll notice as you start using business, a lot of things within the system all tie back to the order. This is how it's all being kind of fed into one another, is through the order in a lot of ways. So it's a good idea to include the order if you are going to be tracking that kind of information. Now another thing that's really useful, if I do have a task and I have the order included, I can also go to an order So if I go into an order and I have that task associated to the order, you can see in the order itself there is a task tab. Now if I click on this, it's going to pre-filter all of the tasks that are for this exact order. So it can be useful if this order that you have is going to be taking a lot of work and will have a lot of tasks, so a lot of steps. You can have them all laid right here, and it's going to be placed within the order, which can be more organized. So you're not going to your task list and trying to search for it and everything. You could just go directly to the order. Now, like I said, if it makes sense for your company, you can definitely turn it on. You may not be tracking the order along with the task. The task just may be internal things you're doing and things like that, and that's fine too. Now, when you include the order, you can also choose if you want to make it required. You can also choose if you want to create a new order from the task. So that allows you to have a quick add. So in a lot of areas of the system, if you notice I hover over an area, there's a quick add icon right here to add. So that's what that's going to allow you to do. When you hover over the order, you can do a quick add to quickly create that order. So it's really useful. Quick adds have been added throughout the system, and the reason why we've done that is because we never want you to go backwards. We always want you to move forward. So like for example here, if I go create a task, and then I realize I haven't created my order yet, I now have to leave my task, go create the sales order, go back to the task associated, and it's just way too many steps. So instead what we've done is add quick adds throughout the system. So what you can do is you can quickly add that order from here so you never have to leave your task. You'll notice that throughout a lot of the system. I do recommend as you're adding things or entering data, just hover over some areas to see where quick adds are available and where they may not be. It's just a good idea so you're aware. Okay. Now you can choose not to show certain orders as well. So if you don't want change orders to show up, so maybe you're tracking the task only with the original order. The change orders are just add-on fees, and you don't necessarily want to track the task with that. You want them all to be stored with the original order. So you can choose not to show the change orders then. Completed orders. You can choose not to show completed orders as well. Because you've completed the order, you want to make sure no one else can enter in time or a task for that order. For that order. Then you can choose to have that selected as well. So that'll only show open, ongoing orders then that are still considered being worked on. Completed orders for recurring orders. So you can see we have the one-time orders and recurring orders as well. So if you want a recurring order that's already been completed, meaning it's no longer recurring, but it was before, it's completed now, you can then check this off so they don't show. Orders that are incomplete. Now you can have an order and instead of creating the order, you can choose to save and resume later. When you save and resume later, it does put the order in an incomplete status. And just to show you what that looks like, when I go to create a sales order, and then I scroll down, see save and resume later. So when I save and resume later, that's going to put it in an incomplete status. Which that's fine if you want it to be able to still attach tasks to that. Now you can have an incomplete order because you're still gathering the information for it, so you're not ready to create it. You're still kind of doing research or whatever it might be. And a lot of that research may end up being put in as tasks, so you may want to associate the task with an incomplete order. Then also orders that are quoted or pending approval. So we do have an approval process, which will be talked about in other lessons with your orders. So what this is saying, if the order hasn't been approved yet, then you can't add a task for it. Which makes sense because you may want to make sure that the customer is on board for everything. You don't want to jump the gun, so to say. You want to make sure everything's on the same page, and you would only want to add tasks for approved orders. Now you can check off all of these, you can check off none of them. It's really up to you. It's just you want to make sure it's going to make sense for your company. So if your company's not using change orders at all, then you won't have to worry about this. Completed orders, that's going to take some thought if you want it to show up or not. Do you ever enter in tasks or to-dos or anything like that for orders that have already been done? In some cases it does because, after an order is complete, you still have those last few minute things you may need to get in there. And then incomplete orders, and then ones that are not approved yet. So it's really up to you how it's going to make the most sense for your company. And you can always go back in here and edit this. So if you do save this and you make it so incomplete orders don't show, and then you realize at a later date, oh, I do need to select an incomplete order on this, you can come back in here, edit this, save and close, and then you can go back to your task and select the incomplete order. Now, some other fields you can have visible as well is the project. So you have your orders, but then you also have your projects. Now, you may have noticed with orders in business, because you do have that tab for your task as well as other things, you can pretty much manage a small project right from the order. You don't even need to create a project. You can see you have your change orders, your assignments, your collaboration, your task, your POs. So it can all be done within here. The difference with the project is a project allows you to be much more organized in an organized fashion because you have multiple orders that may be going into it and you have multiple milestones that may be going into it. So if you do have a more complex process when you're completing work and you would be using projects maybe, then you might want to include the projects. Now, you can choose to include the milestone or not. If you do not include the milestone and you're viewing a task and you select a task from there, the milestone is just going to be put into a status of task not related to a milestone, and then you can move it to the correct milestone. But you can also, right from the task, choose which milestone it should go into, and it'll be put directly there. Now, we are going to talk about projects in our last 2 lessons later in this month, so we will dive deeper into projects as well. Budget hours. So we do have a budget field in our task. Now, the budget, we've left it so it can just be a generic field that you can determine how you want to use it. So, for example, some people use hours, some people use dollars, some people use points. So however you want to track this. And you could see, you can then put in how much time or how much you think this is going to work. A lot of ways that people use the budget is it's letting you know that this task will take about 5 hours to complete. And then you can see, you can kind of mark off how much complete you have done on this task and things like that. So for this one, for example, you can see that the start date isn't until 5/21. It's not due until 5/25, so that gives me about 4 days. And I know it's only going to take about 5 hours. So it's kind of allowing your employees to see, okay, well, I have 4 days to do this. I know it's going to take about 5 hours, so I don't necessarily have to get it done today. I can work on it tomorrow. It's letting them kind of figure out when things needs to get done, and it's allowing them to kind of budget their own time as they see fit then. Now, in the task type, like I mentioned, you can include the field. You can also make it required, and then you can also put a default budget. So if I have this one support ticket, for example, and I know on average a support ticket type of task usually takes about 5 hours. So I'm going to put 5 here, so that way every time I create a task with this type, it's automatically going to be put to 5. Assets is another thing we have in the system. Now, we do have company assets as well as customer assets. So the assets that's being talked about within the task type here is the customer assets. Now, customer assets are really useful because you can create custom fields as well. So you can store any type of information from passwords to licenses to anything you may think of, equipment, machinery, anything like that. And you can keep track of like expiration dates, renewal processes, anything that you need to track for the asset, you can within business. Now, you can also include an asset on a task as well. So just an example, and it may make sense for your company and it may not, but just to kind of give you an example, say I do work on machinery like trucks. So one of my customers, they put in a service ticket into the business partner portal because they need their truck fixed. Now, if I'm storing that truck as an asset for that customer, I can then attach that asset to the task. So as my worker goes on site to work on that truck, he can quickly get to the asset to know exactly which truck it is that he needs to work on. So that's just one example on how you can use assets within tasks. There really is a wide range of varieties, from anything from servers to equipment to computers. There's really no limit to what you can have as an asset within business. And I want you to think about, how can you include those in your task? Does it make sense to include them in the task? Is there information stored within the asset that would be useful when working for a customer on a task? These are some things you can ask yourself to determine if assets would make sense for your company or not. You can also make it required. So that's really, it's a personal preference. If you have a task that you would always make it required, then yeah, definitely check that off. But if it's a task type that sometimes it may be, sometimes it may not have an asset, then you may not want to make it required. So include start date. Now, we did talk about on a task by default. Let me just enter one without a type here. So by default, you can see there is a due date that shows up by default. And you can go ahead and set that date, and easy as pie. That's all you need to do. And you can see it turns green to let you know that it took effect, it's saved. Now, at the type level, you can also choose to enter in a start date. Now, a start date will appear then right next to the due date over here, and it's just a way for you to indicate to your employees when they should be starting on these things, these tasks. Now, you can also include the time. So if they have a task that they're supposed to start today, but not until 3 p.m., then you can mark that with the time as well. You can also make it required. Now, you can see with most of these things in this list, you can make it required. Now, something to keep in mind is if something is required on a task, you cannot mark that task as done until you have entered in all the required fields. So it's something to keep in mind. Now you can mark a task as canceled if there are required fields that are left blank. You can do that, but you're not going to be able to mark the task as done or complete. So that's something to keep in mind. So you can make it required, like I said. You can also do auto-calculate start time, which is really interesting. Now, the auto-calculate start time, it is being based on the created date. So let's say every time a support ticket comes in, I think the start time should be 3 hours after it was created. Oops. Okay. Now you can also include time with the due date as well. So if on your due date, it's you can see it's due 6/1, but it's not actually due until 6/1 at 5 p.m. Having that time there allows you to indicate, I know it says it's due 6/1, but you really do have until 5 p.m. that day. So you still have that all day. So that can be really useful too, especially for tasks that you're working on that are time sensitive, that you need to have it done within a certain time, or you need to start it within a certain time. Having these fields included can be really useful. Having the auto-calculate can be really useful too if it's always usually going to be the same amount. Now, something to keep in mind is I can set a start date. I can always change it on the task itself as well. There is a permission around it. So if you don't want your users to be able to edit the start and due date, then you might want to review their permissions in their user role to make sure they can't. But what this will do, and then it'll set the start date, and then if they have permission, they can change it then if they need to. Just like you can have the start date required, you can also make the due date required. And then you can also do the auto calculation for the due date. Now the due date is also going to be based off the created date. And the reason why that is, it's not being calculated off of the start date, because you don't have to have the start date included to include the due date. So we want to make sure both of them are working as independent fields, so you have the flexibility to choose to have one on and one off. So let's say the auto-calculate due date. So if a support ticket comes in, I'm saying it needs to be done within, or it needs to start within 3 hours, but it needs to end within 5. So that's a 2-hour working time between the start and the end. Now, remember I said they're both being calculated off the start date, or the created date, the created date. And then after I finish filling these out and showing you all these, I'm going to go ahead and create a task with all these fields so I can show you how that calculation would be done and how these other fields display as well. The last option on here is to make the customer required. Making the customer required is a good idea also, especially when it requires communication with your customer to complete this task. It's just making sure that they are related to the task. So if the task ever gets reassigned, there's no questions on who I need to be contacting or anything like that. It can also be useful also when running reporting. So if you want to make sure every task has the customer related to it, so you can run effective reporting like task per customer or things like that, or how long we've been taking to resolve task per customer. Those can all be really useful to kind of streamline your efforts, but it may be a good idea to make the customer required then, so that way you're always choosing a customer. Something else to keep in mind is your company yourself is in here as a customer. So just to show you, if I go to the customers list, and you can see this customer is just called Business Academy, which is the one we're signed into. So if I search for them, if I can spell it right, so Business Webinar, we had it named. So this is me as the customer. Now, when I go into here, you can see I can create tasks for myself as a customer as well. So if you make a task or a customer required on your task, then if you ever come across a task where it's an internal task, it's not necessarily for a customer and you're not sure what to do because you don't want to select a customer if this has nothing to do with them, you can choose your own company as a customer as well. So there's also some notification options. Notifications, within the task type, you can determine if you want to turn off the notifications. So you can see there's different types of notifications that can be sent out. When a task is created, when a task is in progress, and then when a task is done. And then this will just turn off the task assignment notifications. So when a task is assigned and things like that. Now, when a task is marked in progress, like I mentioned before, that's once the person who the task is assigned to goes in and views the task. That's when it's going to be marked as in progress. So this isn't a physical thing you'll have to do to mark it in progress. It's going to happen naturally as soon as the person assigned to it will view the task. The system will know that it's now in progress. So you do also have customer level notifications, as it mentions here, which we'll talk about that in just a moment then. Okay. Subcontractor options. You can also have your task and purchase orders work within the system to send out to subcontractors. You can have it sent to multiple people, so then whoever's the quickest can accept it and things like that, to make sure that your customers are always getting the work done that you need. So it gives you a faster resolution time by utilizing the subcontractor process within business. Now, you simply just mark off that it can be subcontracted work, and you'll see a bunch of other options come up here. To have it as a default as a subcontracted, that means when I go to create my task, by default, it will be as a subcontractor task. So it'll require a PO and things like that. Display customer information before acceptance. So what this is talking about, when your subcontractor signs into the business partner portal to accept this task, to accept this work from you, this will display what the customer's information is beforehand, so they can get some general ideas about, where the task is going to take place, who the customer is, kind of that information. Make attachments uploaded by subcontractor visible to customer. So this is an interesting thing, because if you have your subcontractor out there and he's doing work for you, but then he takes some pictures of the finished product, or he has some documents that will be useful for the customer to have as well, they can choose then to attach these documents to the task within the business partner portal. And by having this option checked off, it'll then make it visible to the customer when they're viewing it in the business partner portal as well. So this is going to make it visible to them, so it's important to keep in mind, if your subcontractors submit documents or photos to you and you want to review them first before giving them to the customer, you may not want this option turned on. There's not going to be a review process. If you make it visible, once they upload it, it will be visible to the customer as well. So if you have this checked off, you can then receive the pictures, the documents, review them, and then upload them to the customer side of things. That is an option as well. The default PO template just allows you to put in a template for your PO. So if there's a lot of the same items you're using, or a lot of the same fields that you use with the same information, you can have a template created and add that here. The PO type, also, like I mentioned, it is a type. So like I mentioned earlier in our discussion today, task types, it's letting you determine what fields you want visible, what do you want required, that kind of thing. The same thing with the PO type. So you see we have two default ones. We have a standard PO and a subcontractor PO. I recommend choosing the subcontractor PO if this is going to be a subcontractor type task. But this can be configured as needed. And to configure your PO's types, you would go to Accounting, AP, and PO types right there. Okay. So I think now we have pretty much everything. I'm just going to add in a few other basic information in here, so we can save this to get to a few other options. Let's go ahead and display menu. I'm going to check everything off just so we can kind of see how it'll look. Include order. Okay. I will get rid of the requirements though, so that way when I do go to show you how this task type is going to work afterwards, we won't have to enter in all the information, just to make it easier on us. Okay, so I have my task type set up. I'm going to go down here and just save. Hopefully I didn't miss anything, and I didn't. So after you save your task type, you can see you have a few other options up here now. The basic info is showing you everything that we had just gone through, but you can also talk, or we can talk about custom fields. Custom fields within the system are very useful for adding additional fields for anything else you want to track, whether it's about your task, your customers, your vendors. There's custom fields throughout the whole system. So to add a custom field, I'm going to go ahead and click Add right here. And just to go over the types, so you have alphanumeric, which allows you to enter in letters and numbers as a combination, and it just comes up as just a field. Integer field, of course, you can only enter in numbers. Now the integer field will add the comma into the thousands place, so that's something to keep in mind if it's not going to make sense. 9 times out of 10, you may just want to go with alphanumeric, so that comma isn't being added in there for you. Decimal field, of course, just shows it as a decimal, and then currency shows it as a USD dollar sign then. The date and time field allows you to select a date and a time, but you also do have date fields and time field. Yes or no allows you to, it's a yes or no question pretty much. Something else to keep in mind on a few of these when you do select them, you do have a display type as well. So with the yes or no field, for example, I can have it shown as a checkbox, so it's just checked on or checked off, or I can have it as a radio button, which would then be a yes or no, and you have to select one of them then. So you also have an alphanumeric multi-line field, which is pretty much the same as the alphanumeric field. It's just a larger field, so they have more visibility when you're entering in information then. Now if I choose this, you do have a display type option for here as well. You can choose to have a rich editor or a multi-line text box. So the multi-line text box it's just going to be that, a text box that you can type in information. Rich editor, on the other hand, will be a text editor box. So you have those the options for bullet points, for bolding, for numbering. You have that options to format whatever information you're inputting. Attachment will have them upload an attachment, and then you can say whatever the attachment is that they need. Select value from a custom list, so you can create your own custom list. You can see we have some default ones in here. To quickly add a new list, you would just select here, type in the whatever it is that you want on your list, or the name of your list, I'm sorry, and then you make the actual list here. So test 1, I hit enter. Test 2, I hit enter. Test 3, enter. And you can see you are making your own custom list, which can be anything then. So once you have created your list, you can see there is some display types as well for this. You can have it as a drop-down list, load on demand. So load on demand, at the bottom of the drop-down list, you'll be able to say load more, and it'll just keep loading more until you get to the bottom of the list. Drop down with checkboxes. So the checkboxes indicates that you're going to be able to check off more than one, where a drop-down list, you can only choose one. The radio buttons, it's similar. It's just instead of having a drop-down menu, it's just they're all going to be displayed and you can only choose one. You also have a checkbox list, which will be the same as the radio button, but you will be able to choose more than one. The drop-down list with other, so if you choose other, you're going to be able to type something else in, and then also the radio button list with other as well. So with the others, they're both going to give you the option to type something else in. And then also the checkbox list with other too. So that's with a custom list, a select value from a custom list. You do also have select value from an existing list. Now if you choose this, you're going to be able to actually choose lists that are stored within the system. So your contacts, your customers, your vendors, your divisions, your employees, your items, your job titles, pools, teams, and tenant locations. So you can see these are all lists that were not custom made. They were lists that just kind of were piling up as you were using the system. As you've added employees, as you've added customers, they've all been added to a list that you can then choose. Okay, so we do also have a couple other options down here. You can make it the custom field required or not, which means that they'll have to input something in order to mark the task as done. Also visible on portal. So the visible on portal is going to choose if you want this field visible to your customer or not. So if it's stuff that's more internal and maybe they shouldn't necessarily be notified about it, then you may not want to have it on. But if it's something that's going to be useful for them to know, then you can check that off. We do also have sections, so you can create different sections within your task. So right now this is additional info. Maybe we'll make another section, call it requirements, and so forth. Now if you want to rearrange these down arrows right here, I can now move the requirements there, and then I can move it back up if I want. I can add the custom fields to either of them. I can click on the section title if I want to rename it. And I can also deactivate sections, and I can deactivate custom fields as well. Let me go ahead and add a custom field. Let's see, R&D employee 1, for example. Let's do from an existing list, and they can choose employees. Okay, I'm just going to save. So you can see I can deactivate a section, and it's just going to ask me if I want to deactivate it. And now you can see it's gone. Now to bring it back is very simple. I can check off include inactive sections here, and you can see it brought it back. It's still marked as inactive though. So if I want to bring it back, I can activate that section again and click OK. It's the same thing with custom fields as well. So I can deactivate an individual field, and then you can see I can include inactive fields here within each section to bring it back, and then I can reactivate it again. So if you ever remove fields, you are able to bring them back, of course. Nothing really ever gets deleted, truly deleted from business. Everything is just deactivated. So you can quickly find the information you need again and activate it. So now the next thing I want to talk about is pools. Now pools within business can be very useful, especially when it's coming to tasks and projects. A pool is letting you create a pool of people so you can have multiple people be notified when it comes to things like tasks and projects. So in order to add a pool to your system, you would just go into Company and Settings. You would go down to Task, Pool Setup, and then Pools. Now you can see we do have a default pool in there already that can be edited or utilized as it is, or you can add a new one. So let's add a new one. I'm actually just going to use the one that was already created, Customer Advocates, for example. So the first option that comes up is default pool for unassigned tasks. So if a task is ever created from the business partner portal, or it's created from somewhere and it has no one as the default assignment, it's going to know to look for whatever the default pool is. So you can see we do have set up the default pool as the default, but that can be changed if that makes more sense, and you could have it go to customer advocates or customer reps or something like that. Description just allows you to add in a description, so just so if anyone is ever going into the settings doing configuring, they would be able to see whatever notes is added in here. Now you have pool managers. So just to give you an idea, the pool managers, they can assign any task from the pool to anyone, and then they can also assign a task to the pool. So the pool manager has the ability to take those tasks that are currently sitting in the pool, assign it to the people in the pool, and then they're also able to take those tasks and assign them directly to the pool. So that's what a pool manager will be able to do then. And you simply type in the name and adds them to the list. And you can see you can choose more than one person. Okay. Notification recipients. So notification recipients, it's just that they're going to be notified when a task is added to their pool. So it can be really useful because once they are notified, the notification will have a link in the email to the task. So they would click on the link, it takes them directly to the task, and then they can reassign it to themselves. Now when the other people sign in as well to view, they're going to see that that task is currently assigned to Alice and is already being handled. Now you can see you can select an employee from this drop-down list, but you can also do a job title or just a regular email. So you can see job title support. It's going to add everybody who has this job title to this notification list, as well as an email. So you can see entering an email, it can be useful as well, because if someone's not signing into the system, or if they have a shared email, for example, you can add in a separate email that's not associated with business at all to make sure they get notified then. Now, of course, if they are in here to be notified, but they're not a system user, they're not going to be able to click on the link to sign in to view information about the task. This is simply for notifying them. Okay. So I think this gives you a pretty good idea on all of the functionality you can do while setting up your task. The one thing I do want to show you last before we end this lesson is I did show you the task list on how you can enter a task, but let's go ahead and enter a task with the type we just created. So we did support ticket. I'm not sure which one because it seems like there's two of them in there, so let me just do test. Yes, so you can see the start date and the due date, they did calculate based on the current time. So the current time right now is 9:01, so it put the start date at 12:01 and the due date at 2:01. Now, like I said, I can change this if I want. If you don't want your employees to be able to change the start date and the due date, it's a good idea to review the permissions. I'm not exactly positive what the, yes, so task. So you have edit due date and edit start date. So you want to make sure if your employees shouldn't be editing that they don't have this permission, along with the start date as well then too. Okay. And you can see it put the default budget in there. The type is selected. The customer, I can go ahead and search for someone. Let's see. The location I can select as well. Now the good thing about having the location here as well is you can do it a map it feature, so you can view this in Google Maps. So if I'm out on the road especially, I can quickly get to directions and then hit directions. And voila. Oh, well, I need to choose my starting date, but that's still very useful. The order, I can then also choose the order, and then I can view the order as well, or who's assigned to the order. So it's a good idea to always check on these hover icons, because you can see there's a lot of useful information. Quick adds, quick views, like quick access, also viewing the assignments, so that way you're not having to keep leaving your page to find information. You can quickly get to everything here. And just to show you, when I do a quick link to an order, for example, it will open in a new tab. So I'm not losing the place I'm at either. I can go in here, review whatever information I need, X out of it, and you can see I'm right back at the task I was at. Project as well, you can add a project, and then you can even select the milestone and the request to buy. Now you can see if there's a contact tag next to it, it's looking for what are the contacts for this customer. So you can see Valerie Johnson is a contact for this customer. If there is more than one contact, then they will show up underneath her as well. But then you can see underneath the contacts then will be internal employees. So you can choose the request by as an internal employee or by the contact. And then once you have that selected, you can then do a view the request to buy. You can send a quick email to the request to buy, or you can add a new contact right from here if your contact isn't in there yet. Assets as well. I don't believe I have any assets in here, but you'll be able to select it from this list as well. Now here's those custom fields we created. Now we only created the one, I think, so but you can see requirements, so it puts it up into the sections as you create them. And then I can choose from this list then, and click update, so all your custom fields will appear right here. And then description, you would put in whatever description you said, and like I said, you do have the advanced editing, so you can add hyperlinks, you can insert images, you can copy and paste images in here as well by just copying and paste, which is very useful. And you can kind of format it so it's a bit more organized and a bit more useful then. Okay, so that's one way to enter a task. I did want to show you kind of a few different ways you can access tasks or enter them then. So the task list, but another important thing is to remember you can view them under the customer. Similar to how you can view it under an order, you can also go to a list of tasks under the customer. So if I go to this customer and I click on their tasks tab right here, it's going to show me a list of all their tasks that's currently open. And you can see we only have, of course, the one that we just created.
So it's important to keep in mind you can view your task from under your customer from the task list, and yeah, it's very useful to know the different areas you can view your task then. So that's it for today on setting up your task. At our next lesson, we are going to talk about then how you can process your tasks. So everything that you would need to work on and know how to do in order to process your task as you're working on them. I hope you guys learned a lot today, and I hope you join us at our next Business Academy lesson, and I hope you all have a great day. All right, bye.